All right, let's dive into one of America's darkest, most unsettling historical mysteries. It's a story that's got everything: brutal murders, a confession that's just shocking, and a killer who, well, may never have been caught at all.
I want you to imagine living in a place where the sun going down means that absolute terror takes over. For communities all across Louisiana and parts of Texas in the early 1900s, this wasn't a story. It was their reality. The dread was so thick, you could feel it. The night itself, it became the enemy. So why? What could possibly cause that level of widespread panic?
Well, the cause was a wave of murders. And these were not ordinary crimes. No, these were brutal, almost ritual-like slaughters that completely upended daily life. It turned existence into this desperate struggle for survival, and it left the entire region just paralyzed with fear.
And we're not just talking about people being a little extra cautious. This was full-blown mass hysteria. We've got historical accounts of people literally firing their guns at shadows. Mothers would stay awake the entire night clutching a weapon, just ready to protect their kids from whatever was lurking in the dark.
You know, the terror wasn't just from the violence itself, but from its terrifying consistency. A horrifying signature started to emerge, and it suggested that these weren't just random acts of violence. This was the work of someone or something with a very specific and very gruesome purpose.
And the escalation was just terrifyingly fast. I mean, in a single year, multiple families were massacred in their own homes with an axe, a lot of them while they were sleeping. You had the Byers, the Andresses, the Randalls. The list just kept growing, and the nightmare got deeper with every single month that passed.
But believe it or not, the axe wasn't even the most disturbing signature. At every single crime scene, the killer left behind a bucket, and it was intentionally placed to collect the victim's blood. Now, for investigators, this one detail changed everything. It pointed away from just random brutal violence and straight towards something way more sinister: a ritual.
The police were getting desperate. They arrested a man, Raymond Barnabet, and for a brief moment, it probably felt like the nightmare was finally over. But then, while he was locked away in a jail cell, another family was murdered in the exact same way. Raymond was innocent.
So this left everyone, from investigators to the public, with the same terrifying, burning question. If it wasn't Raymond Barnabet, then who in the world was committing these atrocities? The answer, as it turns out, would come from the most unexpected source you can possibly imagine.
The answer came from Raymond's own daughter, a 19-year-old named Clementine Barnabet. Now, she had originally testified against her own father, but then, in a twist that no one saw coming, she confessed. She said she was the killer. And the scale of her confession was just staggering. She didn't just confess to 1 or 2 murders to get attention. She calmly, coolly claimed responsibility for 17 deaths. 17.
And her confession was bizarre. She didn't just say, "Yeah, I did it." She declared, "I am the axe woman from the Church of Sacrifice." She claimed she was the leader of a secret, incredibly violent religious cult.
And if you think that's strange, it gets even weirder. When investigators asked her, "Okay, how did you and your followers commit all these crimes without anyone ever seeing you?" her explanation was totally surreal. She claimed she bought a $3 hoodoo charm, that's a kind of folk magic, and that it gave them all the power of invisibility.
So, on the surface, it looks like the police have their killer and a motive, no matter how strange it is. But as investigators started to dig a little deeper, that whole confession, this neat and tidy, terrifying story, it began to completely fall apart at the seams.
The physical evidence just did not add up. For the Randall murders, for example, she claimed that she shot the father after she hit him with the axe. But the autopsy proved the exact opposite. The gunshot came first. There were other huge problems too. She even confessed to a murder that happened while she was already locked up in jail. I mean, it was physically impossible. And the inconsistencies just kept piling up. Medical reports describe Clementine as being physically frail. It's pretty unlikely she could overpower entire families by herself. Her story also changed, a lot, right after a certain detective paid her a visit. And that so-called hoodoo practitioner she named, yeah, he turned out to be a respected local man who denied he had anything to do with it.
So this brings up a new and honestly a much darker question. You have to remember the context here. This is the American South in the early 20th century. Was this a real confession from a deeply disturbed cult leader, or was this a story that was forced on a vulnerable young black woman by a desperate, and let's be honest, a notoriously abusive justice system?
What happens next is maybe the strangest part of this whole story. Her trial, the bizarre sentence she receives, and what ultimately happened to her, it all just deepens the mystery even further.
At her trial, she stood up in front of the jury and made this statement that just defies all logic. She said, "I killed them all, but I am not guilty of murder." How is that even possible? It's a quote that just perfectly captures how confounding this entire case really is. So, despite all the contradictions, she was sentenced to life in prison. But what followed is just extraordinary. Only a year later, she has this crude lobotomy performed on her. Then, doctors declare her cured. And get this, after serving just 10 years of a life sentence for mass murder, she was released. And then, she just vanished. Never seen or heard from again. And here it is. This is the most chilling fact in this whole story. After Clementine Barnabet was locked away, and even after she disappeared from the face of the earth, the axe murders, with the exact same ritualistic details, kept happening.
The killings didn't just continue, they spread. They followed the railway lines, almost like a plague moving from town to town. The police even got a letter, supposedly from a group calling themselves the Real Killers, and they were mocking the police for convicting an innocent girl.
Which brings us right back to that central, terrifying question that has haunted this case for more than 100 years. If Clementine Barnabet wasn't the axe woman, then who was?
In the end, all we're left with are these haunting possibilities. Was Clementine just a scapegoat for a racist justice system that needed to close a case? Was she a mentally ill teenager who got lost in her own dark fantasies? Or, and this one is the most terrifying thought of all, was she telling some version of the truth? Was she just one member of a real, hidden cult that kept on with its bloody work long after she was gone? The real answer remains buried, a chilling secret from America's past.